Here's to whiskey kisses, the peaty taste of sin, Edinburgh morning with the smell of...
Greetings, whiskey folk, and welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. I am your host as ever, Adam Bradshaw, and it is an absolute pleasure to have you back here on the official Dram Association YouTube channel in the Strat Studio for another collaboration tasting with the 2021 Victoria Whisky Festival. The festival that, whilst it couldn't happen in its usual time and place in January here in Victoria, is happening right now in our homes and in our hearts, and we are very happy to be having a fantastic special guest speaker today. This is, I think, the debut of this gentleman. He's about to appear to you for the first time ever, promoting his whiskey, Simon Farrington from Tallant. Welcome to the show, Simon.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, and thanks to the Dram Association and to you for and others for keeping the festival alive here, despite the circumstances. Happy to be here.
There's one thing that this pandemic has really done to the whiskey scene, and that is made us think outside the box a little bit. And I think all over the world, everyone involved in whiskey is doing the same kind of thing and seeing how we can keep the community together. Because that's, one of the most important things about whiskey that we have to remember. It's not a drink, it's not even a hobby. It's a community, and I think the community is still strong. And it's wonderful to be able to continue it in this weird digital way. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are scratching their head and going, Tallant, that rings a bell. To some people, they might have never heard of it. And a lot of people, they're thinking, didn't that close down like 100 years ago or something? Would you care to enlighten us as to what Tallant is and who you are and how that all plays together?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a very personal story for me, and it's fun to look back over the last 20 odd years to share the story. You're right, Tallant was a distillery on a farm on Islay, a few hundred yards from where I grew up, close to Beaumont actually. And it was around in the 1820s, 1850s, and run by one of the Johnston brothers whose other brother, I think, was at Laphroaig, and I think when it wrapped up or closed down, he joined in with the folks at Laphroaig. So like many little farm distilleries, they had this was part of the trade on Islay for goods and services, and the rumor is they shared a little bit too much whiskey, and commercially it became kind of unviable because they were a bit too generous. So it's kind of a nice way to go out with the business, if you like.
Yeah.
So yeah, fast forwarding a long time. I grew up in Beaumont with whiskey all around, and on Islay with everyone working in different distilleries and it being very much part of the community.
You realize you just made every single viewer incredibly jealous, right?
Well, yeah, it would be a lot of fun to live there as an adult, and I kind of made the mistake of moving elsewhere as an adult, as most young people do on Islay. And actually at a time when the whiskey industry was in a bit of a depression, vodka had come along and actually caused its uptick in the market. It caused a lot of distilleries to shut down or go back to very limited production. So really, like many immigrants to Canada, I moved over here and more became interested in my own culture and background there. And I was going back quite frequently. Excuse me. I was going back quite frequently in those first few years. So an interesting opportunity came about when a good friend of our families, Jim McEwen, restarted Bruichladdich. So Bruichladdich was always my favourite. I had a bottle stashed at a bar in Glasgow, the Ushkava, which had a Canadian barman actually, so it also came together. And Bruichladdich always being that accessible, light, more floral dram was great. The whiskey from my home village, Beaumont, was a big heavy beast that I just couldn't drink, too peaty at the time. So when Bruichladdich restarted, I just thought this was a real opportunity to get involved a little bit, to see where Jim was going to take this. He's a very vibrant, fun character that I've known since I was a little kid. And he started to sort of educate me and my family. And we ended up going along on a bit of an experiment with him that in large part became Bruichladdich. But our little slice of it became buying a whole lot of casks. Well, a whole lot for us would be about 10.
Nice.
Over a period of a few years. And, we started conservative with, refill bourbon barrels and standard spirit. And we started to get a bit more experimental and wacky, and really learned through Jim and others what a spirit can do when it goes into different barrels and has a different upbringing, if you like.
So yeah, Jim McEwen, absolute whiskey royalty. I'm sure you'll agree. It's probably a little bit strange for you now, being involved in whiskey on the other side of the world, and all these people like really having this romanticized idea of what Islay's like, the place you grew up, and really sort of idolizing almost a family friend of yours. And Jim McEwen, I've never met the guy. Hopefully one day I'll be lucky enough to have the chance to. But like many whiskey lovers, I almost feel like I kind of know him a bit, because if there's one person that pops up in every single whiskey documentary that's been made in the last 20 years, it's Jim. He loves telling his story, and it's good. It's a real feel good story. The story of Bruichladdich especially. But yeah, it's really cool to have. I feel like I'm only one link away from him now. I'm glad to have met you.
Yeah, well, that's true, and all the folks who worked in the distilleries were very much part of our lives, and were not those famous personalities in my childhood, and they really have become that. And people from the background, I mean, who knew who Ginger Willie McNeil was from the warehouse in Beaumont in the rest of the world when I was a kid? Well, no, but we did, because his wife looked after us when we were kids, and things like that.
Yeah, you probably played darts with him in the pub, right?
It was people you passed in the street, and that's sort of I think that really came home to me moving away from Islay to a big city, to Glasgow. I'm an engineer. I went there to study, and then moving to Canada. A part of it was that connection to the people and rebuilding a community, which takes a long time in a city where it's a bit colder, and the roots are a bit less deep. It's something else about Jim that I always really enjoyed was, on the one hand, I was training to be a scientist and an engineer and be very pragmatic and objective. And Jim represented along with the whole whiskey industry this really cool story about empirical experimentation and just feel and artisanal production, and they in a sense they don't. The industry in that sense doesn't need science and reason, and you can have it. So I love that juxtaposition to chat with Jim and others about whiskey. It's so like music, completely subjective. Your favorite track is one I don't like, and vice versa. So I found Jim was one of those people that was a real connection to how whiskey is made there, and sort of not a disregard for science, but not really a need for science in a sense.
But still very much a need for science in one aspect, because there's an awful lot of engineering goes into setting the equipment up, for example, whereas in the day-to-day making of whiskey, once you're all set up, it's very much in a lot of cases very touch and feel. It's very very artistic. The actual making of the recipe in the first place, what temperature to set the still at, how long to take the cuts, and all of that. There's a lot of engineering and science going in there, and I find it very interesting that you did engineering basically to get off of Islay, and there's probably a whole bunch of people who are doing engineering right now with the idea of going to Islay.
yeah, that's a good point. I had a really fun email exchange with Adam Hannett and Dr. Taylor the other day about them introducing a hydrogen project in Bruichladdich, because my engineering is hydrogen fuel cells. So
Nice.
that's just really, really cool to see this go full circle and develop.
And of course, Bruichladdich being the progressive Hebridean distillers that they are, that sounds exactly the kind of thing that they'd pursue. And I mean, I remember watching, I can't remember if it was Top Gear, but it was definitely the guy from Top Gear, James May, driving the Bruichladdich fueled car one time. Like, it's brilliant.
Yeah, there's things like that. I mean, Jim is definitely somebody who can make a big impact, and I think a bit of a contrarian, and it comes through in the culture of Bruichladdich. You know, why only distill twice? Why not try 4x? Why this little bit of peat? Let's push it to the extremes. And I really, you know, all of the other distilleries in Islay, as much as I love them, they sort of they're very conservative compared with that outlook. So I guess the way I ended up with all of these whiskies is by inventing things here and getting a small reward from the company I was working for when I filed patents for them. So I was going back with maybe $1,000 or and trying to buy a barrel, doing that a few times, and so learning bits of the process and stitching the story together, really with a view of maybe putting the drawings from the patents on the labels and distributing them to friends and family and somehow making it work.
Yeah.
You know, fast forward a few years and Bruichladdich just has absolutely bloomed, you know, really, really flourished. And I realized it's not so practical just to move whiskey around the world, and it's heavily regulated, of course. Mm-hmm. So with a lot of work with the BC Liquor Board and on our own behalf, we formed Tallant as an independent bottler with a view to starting a craft distillery here as well.
Nice. And I'm sure a lot of people just perked up and was like, ooh, brilliant. A craft distillery started by someone from Islay. Are you going to be trying to make Islay-style whiskey out here, or are you going to do your own thing?
You know, what I found was really a really cool thing about moving to BC was it made me think about just how maybe 100 years ago, those folks who moved here and were here when the population was very small, just about how different foods and agricultural produce and drinks are made as a real product of the environment. And as I was exploring the BC environment in the first few years, wow, this place is so plentiful, and it really is a lot like Islay in a way. You know, it could produce some very, very interesting products and a strong connection between food and drink and land, etc. Which is evident in some of the other distilleries that started up here.
Absolutely. And it's, you know, it also has to be said, just in case he's watching and feels slightly offended, I do actually personally know another Islay legend who did move over here and I believe is still in town. I've not seen him for a little while. Mike Nicholson, formerly of Diageo, who was in charge of some of the larger plants. I think he was with Lagavulin, maybe Kalila for a while as well as some on the mainland. And yeah, he would absolutely agree with you on all of those points.
Yeah. Mike is a well-known legend indeed. Yeah.
So, I think we should open up a whiskey before we get too carried away with stories. And I think the first whiskey that you've chosen here, if I was to pick one of these as the one that says, yeah, Jim McEwen probably had a hand in this, it's probably this one. It's this, like the cask type especially, just makes me think, that makes sense. This is the kind of thing that I imagine. If it had been distilled a decade earlier and been recast by Jim, maybe it would have made its way into one of the Black Arts series. And from the look of it, it would have been right at home in one of those. That is some dark whiskey right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is maybe I don't know, they're all unconventional, but this does represent that style that Jim used to such good effect.
Beautiful. So this one, I'll read the label. It's always a good place to start when looking for information on a whiskey, and something that I myself have fallen foul of just not doing sometimes, and like, oh, I wonder what this is, and just try and research on the internet to get 3 pages down and realize, oh, it's written on the bloody label. Single malt Scotch whiskey, unpeated, unchill filtered, aged in a first fill bourbon hogshead, and finished in a Callejo Tempranillo wine cask. Distilled and matured at Bruichladdich Distillery, Islay, selected and bottled from a single cask by Tallant. Beautiful.
Yeah, we really tried to write down here on the labels exactly what they are, because that's I often find there's a bit of a risk to trying a new whiskey, and you need a bit of a helping hand to just get the facts and not have to hunt around for that. I mean, this one, a bit of the backstory. This one was actually a cask owned by a friend of our family's, and he was very sort of inspired by my idea to do this range. Excuse me. So he put his cask in here. We added it to the range. Yeah, we can go ahead and have a taste.
Nice. I'm going to break the seal on this. I'm going to enjoy this a lot, I'm sure. So I'm sure there's a lot of people who know me well, long time, I say long time viewers. We've only been doing these for a year, not that long time, but long time members of our clubs at least, who are going, oh, this is dangerous territory, because I have a bit of a fraught history with Bruichladdich. I should put that out there before I go anywhere. I've absolutely loved many Bruichladdich, and it's some of my favorite whiskies. I've loved all of the black arts I've ever had. One of my first sort of single malts that I was proud to own a full bottle of when I was a student was one of the Yellow Submarine editions. So my relationship with them goes back quite a while now. But that being said, there is one character that is intrinsic to the spirit of Bruichladdich, which I know a lot of people absolutely love, that to me just kind of ever so slightly off-putting if I find too much of it. So there are a lot of Bruichladdich, and I go, ooh. And I know it's meant to be there. It's just something that doesn't personally jam with me, right? And that's common with any whiskey. But more and more these days, I'm finding that anytime that there's more of a heavy cask influence, that I can't taste that note at all. And it's the same with the more peat as well. So I got very excited by these because I think these are a pretty big, safe bet. So for those watching at home going, will he, won't he? I'm pretty sure I'm going to like these. Don't worry.
I like your optimism. It's so broad what's in these bottles. I think you'll probably find everything.
All right. Beautiful. Yeah. It's such a unique spirit, isn't it? It's amazing. Bruichladdich for me is one of those spirits that it has such a unique fingerprint that can shine through pretty much anything you do to it. Like, this is 2 different cask types. One of them a particularly strong wine cask influence, but you can still tell, even just from the first sniff, that that's Bruichladdich. It's one of the few distilleries that I feel that I can guess correctly a good at least 1/3 of the time, because everyone knows guessing whiskey correctly is actually ridiculously difficult.
I always associated that character, the core character of Bruichladdich, with the bourbon barrels, and this has kind of challenged that for me. These haven't touched a bourbon barrel.
Interesting. Nice. So how was the decision made then, to put this into a finishing cask?
Well, basically, I'll be blunt. It wasn't going anywhere. The cask it was in, and our friend who owned the cask wasn't too satisfied with the outcome. He kind of identified that, and he just wasn't very happy with it. So he I wouldn't say he complained. He sort of asked and found out and educated himself, and they were very accommodating at the time. And Jim said, "Okay, well, what direction do you want to go in, and how can we turn this around?" And actually found another cask and recast it. So I have a sample back from before it was recast, and it was bourbon barrel, and it just, it was kind of oxidizing along the way and mellowing out, but it just didn't seem to be, it was a bit thin. It just didn't seem to be picking up the weight, at least my interpretation of that classic bourbon.
And with whiskey being such an analog item, that's always going to happen. Not every whiskey is going to be absolutely perfect every single time. There's so many different things that can affect it. The area of the warehouse it's in, the tightness of the grain of the wood that it's in. There's so many different moving parts, and that's why you need someone with the kind of expertise that Jim has to be able to find out how to turn that corner. Instead of just selling the whole thing off in bulk to a cheap blending house, what can we do to actually bring out the best bits of this spirit and make them shine? And it feels, the reason that I would say that this is, to me, conceptually just screams Jim McEwen, is that's pretty much what he did when he first took over with all the whiskey that they were sitting on already, wasn't it? They had a bunch of whiskey when they bought Bruichladdich, and need to figure out what the hell to do with it.
Yeah, that's it. That's my interpretation too, and I think necessity was the mother of invention there. And just that risk taking was really interesting. I decided to kind of fairly early on to try to bottle these as single casks, and we have chosen these 5 from a double. I found with single casks in general, there's often such a selection process that single casks avoid sometimes the tails of the style, and I thought it would be really nice to be able to put these in the bottles and let people decide, and maybe they find flaws, and maybe they are a bit more extreme. Mm-hmm. But I'm not a Diageo or a big producer. That it's not. It's a project for me to put it out there. So if my reputation and image is damaged by that, it is what it is.
Well, and I think the education level of your average whiskey enthusiast these days understands by now the concept of single cask, and is very very understanding of the fact that it's not been shaved down. You get the rough edges, but that's kind of what makes it special and unique and gives it the character. It's the same with any independent bottler. Like we do the Scotch Malt Whisky Society here. We get 7 brand new ones every single month, and 9 times out of 10, you're like, if you had to try and guess the distillery, you had no clue, because the whole point of a single cask is that it doesn't necessarily have the characteristics of that distillery. A lot of distillery characteristics aren't necessarily even in the distillation process; they're in the blending process, which obviously hasn't happened. Which I'm sure is actually probably a big part of Bruichladdich as well. A lot of people think that single malts mean single cask, and then are shocked to find out that single malts are, just as blended as some blends are.
Right, and never mind maybe some casks moving around from distillery to distillery in the background.
Yes, you never know.
The SMWS experience for me was really, really cemented that idea. I have a whole cabinet full of them down here. You can't see.
Excellent.
Absolutely loved that experience, and it was sort of inspirational to think, well, yeah, let's go for it. Let's not, spend too much time second guessing and pull back and make some kind of blend and try and make a bit more money or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. Let's go for it and see what happens. It isn't such a large quantity of whiskey that's a huge risk.
Yeah, and for most people that like whiskey, they're going to like pretty much any whiskey, as long as it's a decent quality. And for the really picky ones, then who cares if some people don't like a specific cask that you've put out, because you've put out, hundreds in a year. If you're someone like the SMWS, they're going to like most of them. And I think that's probably going to be the case with this. There's probably going to, if you're a particularly picky whiskey drinker, there might be one of these that you don't really like. But that's fine. There's 4 that you do. That's, it's part of playing the game. And that's why we try and do these kind of tastings and the festivals to try and get people to try before you buy, because that is an important part of the whiskey experience. And right now, for a lot of people that aren't able to try before you buy, that's our job to let you know what we think of these whiskeys. So
it's good to hear that's the ethos of promoting whiskey and selling whiskey that you guys have. I guess it speaks to the relationship you build up with your customer base and the loyalty. that you can take somebody in hand and they will willingly be taken in hand and take a risk of buying an expensive bottle.
Yeah, and I haven't had too many complaints yet. So, well, let's have a bit of an exploration on the nose of this one. So the first thing that hits me is those I never know what to call them. The little tiny red gummies that are sort of like not quite cherry, not quite strawberry flavored, just red flavored, I guess. Red flavored gummies. Yeah, the little sort of dot ones, the tiny little chewy ones. I've not really seen them over here, but they were very popular when I was a kid back in Yorkshire. But yeah, little generic red flavored gummies, and pepper is the first thing that gets me on the nose.
Yeah, I get the honey. Showing my Canadianism here, the honeycomb candy. You'll know the British chocolate in the orange wrapper with what were they called?
The crunchy.
Crunchy. I get the crunchy from this. Yeah.
Sponge toffee. Nice. Yeah. Which, by the way, next time you're back in Scotland and you find yourself in one of the slightly tourist trap areas where they've got fish and chip shops that will deep fry anything for you, deep fried crunchy is where it's at. All right, going in for a dram. Nice. But I think, yeah, slightly. It's got a nice sort of tannic, slightly acidic thing going on there, like a bitter orange peel that I'm really digging. I love that you can still taste the classic, slightly creamy Bruichladdich note, which, is that. I mean, that's the note that sometimes doesn't jam with me, is when that creamy note turns into slightly more of a lactic acid thing. But when it takes away some of the acid, or when the acid is changed and presented a different way, which is kind of what's happening here, it's more of a citric acid. That really works for me. I mean, orange creamsicle. Who doesn't love orange creamsicles, right?
Oh yeah, you'd be insane. This is like I don't know. Every time I try this one, it hits me from a different angle. I get the spiciness that I like to think is the European oak.
Mm-hmm.
I get the bounty, the crunchy bar, and yeah, that bourbon, and they sort of bounce back and forth for me a bit.
Mm-hmm. I'm getting on the second sip there. I'm getting a lot more of the vanillins that you'd expect from the bourbon cask, but also a big hit of cloves as well. It's this. It would be expensive. That I think this would make an absolutely killer hot toddy.
It would be, yeah. Yeah, I don't get so much of the clove, the heavy cloves. Usually, I can smell it when I come in the door if it's cooking, But,
yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about whiskey is much more so than wine and beer, which I tend to stay away from. In terms of talking about, I drink plenty of it. Whiskey is fantastic because no one can ever tell you you're wrong. Everyone has their own individual experience of a whiskey, which is great because I don't have to worry about you calling me out or vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. It's a freebie.
Yeah. I'm getting a touch of licorice now on the nose, going back to the nosing it after tasting as well. Nice. I like this. It's a really good balance of that red wine and spirit characteristic that I think a lot of other distilleries that have since tried doing red wine casks kind of don't quite understand the need for that balance. I think sometimes it can go a little too heavy on the cask influence. If this was all 14 years in that red wine cask, I think this would be trash, to be brutally honest. I think it was pulled at pretty much exactly the right time. Much more red wine influence on this, I think it would be a bit too heavy. But yeah, this having not knowing what it was like before having the finishing cask, I can definitely give this one a thumbs up afterwards.
Good, yeah. I guess this one was kind of redirected along the way and had its, the chance to do that was there. But the others are this is definitely the lightest cask influence.
Rehabilitated.
Rehabilitated.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's off to a very strong start, and I have to be honest as well. as much as I was very much excited to try this one and thinking that this is probably the one that Jim McEwen's fingerprint was more so stylistically on than maybe some of the others, I really like the direction this is going next, because the other casks are very exciting. This next one is one that I don't think I've ever had a whiskey done in one of these casks before, and I'm not entirely sure what it is, to be honest. From what I understand, it's some kind of sweet French dessert wine, not too dissimilar to maybe a Sauternes without the botrytis effect, but I love that kind of experimentation.
Yeah, my understanding is definitely a sort of very, very regional sweet wine, and there's not that effect, but there is a bit of a funky note in there, like that definitely comes from that barrel. And I should say I actually have these barrels still.
Oh, cool.
You're going to think I'm crazy, but I actually shipped them over here for want of a place to ship them. I thought, what the hell, I'll ship them over here and maybe refill them or do something else, or just maybe put my head in them, curl up once in a while. But
do you have a purpose for them yet?
Well, I was hoping to be able to refill them if their condition was okay, or at least keep them.
I can practically guarantee that Shelter Point will be like, yep. Because they've already done ex-Lafroy casks, and they've just bought a bunch of ex-Ardbeg casks that they managed to procure through the brand ambassador for Ardbeg, Brian, who's a good friend of their head distiller, Leon. Leon, if he's watching this, will probably be trying to ask me for your phone number right now, to be honest.
I'll give him a call.
Nice. Now, before I get too carried away with this lovely blue label that we're about to get in, which it's not Johnny Walker, don't worry, it's a very different blue label. I should mention that all of these whiskies are available to purchase right now, both in store at Strathliquor and, of course, online at strathliquor.com. What's more, because they're being featured on Drinking Out Loud, they are available for 10% off for every single Dram Association member. So not just the premium members, but all 1,200 plus of our regular Dram Association members can get this for 10% off. And that first one that we tried, so cask 1125 with the Tempranillo cask, 14-year-old, it's regularly $239.04, and right now with that 10% off, it is $215.14, which, for those of you keeping track of the prices of Bruichladdich these days, is an absolute screaming deal.
That's good to hear, Adam. Yeah, it's tough to find single cask whiskies in BC, so it's good to know there's a few stores promoting it, and these and others.
Absolutely. And the day that I saw these pop up in the warehouse, without even knowing the story, I ordered them sight unseen, simply because the price was right, and we haven't seen any single cask Bruichladdich apart from one Port Charlotte in my entire sort of 5 years doing this in BC. And yeah, so this is very exciting to have 5 at once. All right, I'm going in for a nose. Tell me about this one.
Okay, yeah. This one. I just sort of came into contact with this barrel on a trip there, and it was just so unusual. I'd never heard of it, and I'm not really very well educated in wines or the subset of sweet French wines or fortified wines, or I've kind of built my understanding up of sherry and port and Madeira and so forth, and reef salt. It just seemed so unusual. So we just went for it, and it was at a time. I guess it was one of those times where you're on holiday back in the old country and getting all nostalgic, and just okay, let's just do it. Let's just go for it. So this one, it's been in a reef salt barrel for 7 years straight. So I expected this to be the whiskey that I would like, because I do like that. I actually like quite a woody character to the whiskey. So I thought that's an opportunity. If no one else likes it, at least I will. So 7 years is quite a stretch to leave this in such a sort of active sweet barrel. I don't have that base kind of bourbon influence that was becoming so common in finished whiskies. So yeah, that's the first. That was the first sort of risk with this one. But it's certainly this is certainly an outlier.
I have to say, from the nose, it has absolutely paid off. And I think one of the first customers who actually purchased these whiskies from the online store and sent me an email asking me a couple of questions about them was asking, like, why are they all 14, but then one of them's 7? I was like, well, I'm pretty sure you don't want this one at 14. Trust me. Like, 7 is probably the perfect age for this.
That was the case.
Yeah. Oh, that is glorious on the nose. Oh, what is that? That is a very specific smell. That it's those honey and lemon throat lozenges.
Yeah, I get sort of honey. I remember having honey, frozen grapes with honey on them once, and that's the memory that comes to my mind.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's a bit kind of marzipan-y to me as well.
Marzipan, perfect. Yeah, yeah, that is a very unique and interesting nose. I'm getting a slight bit of kind of like almost a rum-esque kind of a thing going on. You know, some of those rums that are treated almost a bit more like whiskeys, the rums that you can get in maybe a sherry cask or something that kind of takes off that molasses edge.
Okay.
Oh, that's glorious. A little bit of a banana pudding. All right. Oh, that is good, isn't it? That is real good.
Yeah, it's got a bit more strength than the last one. Yeah, it's a few points stronger, of course, but you can feel that.
Yes, and I probably should have mentioned the ABV as well. My mistake there. The first one was 52.3, and the second one here is 58.2. So yeah, there's a good 6% jump in that.
And this one, I think, was really sort of inspired by the SMWS again. I tended to buy myself and tasting the SMWS whiskies, the ones that no one else really liked, the ones that maybe had something I really like. You're going to hate me for this, but that little bit of sulfur candle, not enough to be a flaw, but that tiny little hint that you wave them out.
I am 1000% on your side for that.
That to me just makes makes a whiskey explode in contrast to that note, like the black pepper on the strawberries, or the I hear a lot about the Chanel No. 5 with the truffle oil or whatever was in there. That it just everything else.
Counterpoint, yeah.
So that's where I get a little tiny hint of that in here, and
I'm going to go looking for that now, because unlike a lot of people who are very much afraid of the S word, I like to embrace it under certain circumstances. Obviously, with a lot of really old whiskies where the sulfur is coming from a particular dodgy cask that has been used, an actual sulfur candle was used on the cask. That's not really done anymore. 9 times out of 10, with any whiskey that's been made in the last at least 20 years, the sulfur that you find is meant to be there. It's part of the design of the spirit. If you look at things like Mortlach, they pile the sulfur in there as the new make spirit, and then it actually develops in the cask beautifully.
Yeah, there's certainly that. It is reminiscent of tasting your first Mortlach, where you sort of look into a bit more deeply. And as an engineer, I look at the process and say, okay, well, let's try to figure this out, the worm tubs and what's going on. And I don't know. I don't get the sulfur per se from this, but I do get something that's just a little bit.
There is that bit meatiness in there. Behind the sweetness, there's something sort of big and bold holding it together. It's like and savory as well. It's kind of like a teriyaki sauce in that sense. It's got the sweetness, but it's got the savory holding it together as well.
Right.
Yeah, that is really good. So much honey I'm getting on this one. That is spectacular. And a nice sort of foresty herbaceousness as well. Not in like a pine needle way, but more in almost like a fern way.
Yeah, there's a savory sort of leafy side to this. Yeah.
Like, what are they called? Those the edible ferns that they eat over here.
Oh, the
little fiddleheads. Aye, that's the one.
Right.
Good call. Yeah, little fiddleheady. Fiddleheads in honey. That would be the S&WS name, because then it ties the wood into it as well.
That's a pretty novel tasting note. You want to write that one down,
That's really good. Yeah, that is excellent. Oh, nice. So how much of a consultation with the folks at Bruichladdich did you have with getting these? Was this sort of you were guided with quite a strong hand, or was it you got the pick of the house and they just told you if you did something terribly wrong?
Definitely guided with a strong hand, and I came into it with seeing things from a processing perspective, and with at the time not as much whiskey knowledge or tasting experience as I had accumulated now, but it was really about being there a few times and seeing that I guess the power of restarting a distillery with a light style with a vintner and having all of these barrel options that you would walk up the back of Bruichladdich and you'd turn around and you'd like, Chateau de Cam, where did these come from? Every time there seemed to be something else going on. And
the inventory process there must be madness.
Yeah.
Most places it's just like, we've got X many thousand bourbon hogsheads, we've got X many thousand Oloroso hogsheads, this many butts, we're done. There must be like 4 pages of things going on at Bruichladdich.
But I was pulled along by the enthusiasm and of their experimentation, and I can't claim to have personally nosed 1,000 casks and selected these 5. It's just not the way it came off. It was this is cool. It's restarting, and there's some risks getting taken and some true experiments being done, and going along with that on a very small amount of information, just having a taste of knowing what the new spirit was like, and having a taste of a nose of this and that cask, and doing a bit of research, thinking, hey, this whatever's in here, whatever's in this barrel is just going to be amplified over 10 or more years, and it's pretty freeing to just kind of make that experiment.
Yeah.
Because,
did you find yourself going back and tasting quite often, or?
I did in the first few years go back quite a lot, and then I've had quite a few samples sent over from time to time. Yeah,
labeled as vinegar or something, right?
Yeah,
I'm familiar.
A whole cabinet full of here, actually. Like typically, here's I would get little bottles sent over or go and pick them up. This is
nice.
This is a Loch and Doll. That's one of the other barrels that's still back there. So the big heavy hitting PT numbers are mostly still back there, still aging.
Oh, beauty. All right, so I know there's a lot of people who are watching along during the premiere here, joining in the live chat. Actually, I should mention a big shout out to everyone who's joining in the live chat. I'm right there with you. And in case anyone's confused by that statement, this is not recorded live. It's just shown at a specific time. So I'm not some kind of magic being who can talk to you and type at you right now. So this is a couple of weeks ago. But yes, I am typing right now in the live chat. If you have any questions, please do post them there. And I'm sure there's several people in the live chat already going, get to the point where you put this one live. I want to buy it. So this one is available right this second. I'm hitting the launch button in real time alongside this. Cask 2110, how do you pronounce it? It's not, I always go River Salters, but it's not quite that, is it? It's River...
Reef Salt.
Reef Salt. Nice. That's much more French sounding, actually. Yeah. Thank you. Reef Salt, the 7-year-old. This is regularly $234.70. Now, right now, this is $211.23 with your Dram Association membership. If you're not a Dram Association member yet, you can sign up right now at strathliquor.com. Just go to the clubs menu and go to the Dram Association. All of the steps are right there. And you can even put your membership in the basket and also put this whiskey in the basket, and you will automatically get the discount when you check out with both of them together. Yeah, $211 for this whiskey is just very, very good deal. You don't see that kind of you don't see this quality of whiskey from this from this kind of big name distillery from an independent bottler at that price in BC. You have done a huge service. Thank you very much for bringing these in. A lot of people are very happy with you, Simon.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, it's you get used to not being able to get quite a few products even beyond whiskey in BC. So I'm glad to hear that. And I would say, throw questions at me too. I don't profess to be an extreme whiskey expert, and I'm just sort of laying the story out here. But anyone who's throwing the questions at you, Adam, kick them on to me or directly give me a call. Quite happy to chat.
Will do. I will happily play the middleman for any questions that you guys have directly for Simon. All right, so what do we have next? We're going back to 14 years old. Actually, I should mention this is the only thing in the lineup that isn't 14, as I mentioned from that email I had earlier. Everything else is 14 years. Is that by design or by accident there, Simon?
Well, a little extra secret on that one is we intended to bottle them at around 14 years. We got going quite quickly and had some labels done at what was it, 13 years at first, and got into it, and it took so damn long with the liquor board here. I don't want to bash them. It was actually something new for them and took a lot of understanding, a lot of valid questions. How can you own this whiskey and bottle it? Where how are you doing all this? It was a little unusual. So we actually had to remake the labels and bump it up. So most of these are, officially and everything else, they're 14 years. Most of them are actually 15, 16. Most of them are 16, a couple 15, just by the way it fell. Nice. Once you've got that label done, you've got that label done. And there's some practicality about, obviously, if you leave it too long, the percentages change that you've got on the label, so you've got to move fast. So yeah, that's the way it played out. I'm not really a suspicious person, but many are. So having 13 on the label was nice to avoid.
Fair enough. Yeah,
it would have been nice, but that's the way it goes.
And I don't know. There's something fun about 14 as a number. It feels like a number you don't very often see in whiskies. Everyone and their dog has a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. Everyone avoids 13 like the plague, but why not 14?
Yeah, it's fate in this case, but if it makes it stand out, that's a good thing. Yeah,
absolutely.
In keeping with the character of the whole project.
So we're going for the white label next. This one is cask 580. As the guys were unloading this into the store when it first arrived, these whiskies, and were like, what on earth have you ordered now, Adam? They were lovingly referring to them as the Power Rangers series because of the colors. So this is the White Ranger. Tommy. Everyone got very excited about Tommy being here. And this one is a cask type that I found myself enjoying. And actually, funnily enough, just talking about how 14-year-old isn't really done, weirdly, this cask type is strangely very commonly found in 14-year-old whiskies. As I believe, I might be wrong here, but I believe the Glenmorangie is now 14-year-old, the Quinta Ruban. I know one of them came 14. I'm pretty sure it was the Quinta Ruban. But one of my all-time favorite port cask whiskies is the Tomatin 14, which is a port cask as well, which is absolutely fantastic. Big fan of the effect that European oak port casks can have in a whiskey, and very much looking forward to seeing what they can do in a Bruichladdich, because to the best of my knowledge, I've never had a pure port cask Bruichladdich before.
Yeah, well, this was inspired by another sort of quirky story. The opportunity came along for port cask and sherry casks at the beginning of this adventure, and we together with my parents, who are sort of part of this whole scheme to cask these whiskies.
Scheme's the perfect word. I love that.
We spent quite a bit of time in those warehouses, basically drinking. And trying to get some reference points, but I didn't know too much about port and did a lot of research, and by chance, my father-in-law's probably going to see this at some time, so I might as well come clean now. He gave us a whole pile of port to store, maybe 6 or 8 bottles, and one was a 1966 that the cork was damaged on, and I unfortunately had to open, pour into a mason jar, and consume. And I just realised around about that time, wow, this is port. This is the best of port that I've ever tasted. And my God, if this can turn out anything, if this can adopt anything from port, this is a wonderful experiment. And then started exploring the port cask whiskies, like you say, the Tallant is this good example. So yeah, since I have a good friend who's living in Portugal and can explain, port, the average life of a port cask in a farmer's cellar, or just give me a whole lot more insight into port casks, so can maybe get a few more port casks later on to remake something that might approach this.
Nice. And yeah, it's interesting that that vintage port is. I don't know if it actually is, or whether it's just in the circles I'm involved in, having a bit of a renaissance right now. I was introduced to like really good quality, super old port actually by one of the founders of the Victoria Whisky Festival, Lawrence Graham. I was over at Lawrence's house having a barbecue with himself and Frank and Pat Dunlop, and a couple of other people were there. And he just brought out this, I think it was a 1970s port. And I was just like, yeah, okay. I've always kind of enjoyed port as just an interesting thing to have at Christmas, but yeah, this is damn good. So it's nice being able to have that tie-in. As much as it's very, very cool to have a whiskey matured in something I've never even heard of, it's really nice being able to try and draw parallels to the product that actually used to be in the casks that this whiskey was matured in.
Yeah, this one's got me into trouble. I've got a few open bottles here. In danger of becoming my own best customer here, but this one's got me in trouble because I have been, sorry Jim, I have been sipping into a wee bit of this port collection that you've given to me for safekeeping, but I find it sort of top out after a glass of port. It's too much. This I don't. I could eat my way through this whole bottle. Nice. I sort of wish it didn't have any alcohol in it, to be honest, because the taste is quite moorish.
This, interestingly, before I forget, I figured I should tell people the ABV on this one for those joining in at home. This is 56.9, so quite a lot more similar to the 7-year-old than the 14-year-old that we've already had. So
yeah, this barrel, which is stored here in Vancouver now, I've had sort of a brief look at these barrels when they arrived a few weeks ago, and put them into storage. This barrel is clearly so old and dilapidated. It might be fun to sort of fill it all up and see if it can ever be sealed again. But I should have found some good photos of these barrels. Yeah, you can just see this barrel has been used for decades.
So I don't know if this is actually something that's that would make sense for you, but I think it would be fantastic to plan ahead for when trade shows and festivals and things happen again. If you want to put these whiskies out on the road, use those barrels as the table at the whiskey festivals. You can actually bring the barrels to the festival. That's a good I have to rent a truck, but
yeah, we can just slip that into the conversation. Here's the barrel.
So how big is a hogshead? Well, funny you should ask. All right. Beautiful. Yeah. So I have to admit, I'm getting a little bit more of a nose tingling sensation that would suggest that the higher ABV. I'm getting that a little on the nose, but in no way in an unpleasant way. More in a, hey, this is big, it's voluminous, it's got a lot going on. The first thing that comes to mind for me on the nose is damson jam.
Yeah, I get that sort of black cherry damson. Yeah.
Oh yeah. As soon as you said black cherry, went back in. It's that, what's that cake that Becca doesn't like? Becca, hi Becca, or Kai as you sometimes prefer to be called, is one of our longtime viewers, and I'm sure she's watching right now. She does an awful lot of baking, and in the chat we were talking about baking during the last one that just came out, which was with Frank Hudson, and it turns out that Becca absolutely hates Black Forest Gâteau cake. No idea why, but this smells like Black Forest Gâteau cake, which I'm fairly sure the vast majority of people really like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's brambles and black cherries for me, and you know when you get a meringue, just a pure meringue, you put too much of it in your mouth and start chewing it. There's a sugar kind of hit from that. That's it's got that meringue, sherbety meringue background there for me too.
It's like some German has decided to move to Australia, discovered the wonderful thing that is a pavlova, but made a pavlova hybrid with a Black Forest Gâteau. Right, yeah, screw the tropical fruit. We're putting cherries and blackcurrant syrup on this.
You know, Adam, I've noticed you've not touched the water at all during your whole lineup here.
No, I've drunk a couple of sips of water from a glass, but I haven't actually added any. No, you're quite right. Which
is you know, absolutely, however you want to do it. I find these are very concentrated in flavor, but I haven't needed to add a lot of water. And sometimes I do, just for variation. But
on that point, so that's one thing I do like to do is I try it. I always try it at full strength first, and then I experiment with water afterwards. But I tend to find I'm very quiet and contemplative while I do that, so it doesn't make very good TV. I do generally go back and add water afterwards as I'm exploring, but I will, for the sake of conversation right now, add a couple of drops of water to this and see what happens.
No pressure.
No, I'd be doing it anyway. I'd just be doing it later.
Try not to murder this here with a drop.
Yeah, I think people who watch a lot of whiskey things on YouTube are very, very familiar with Ralphie's giant teaspoons of water. So I think you'll get away with anything, really. Very nice. Oh, that's interesting. So we were talking about counterpoints earlier, right? And one flavor note that then is so different from many of the others, it creates a really good contrast. I'm getting the sharp, sort of almost rennet-y note that you get from a well-aged cheddar. And that is a very good contrast to the dark fruits.
There's something that comes out there, yeah, a proteiny note or something. It really changes, the mouthfeel of this really changes with a drop of water to me.
Yeah, I'm actually going to add another drop and pay closer attention visually because I love watching the oils and the fatty esters disperse with the water. Gives you a really good idea of quite how. There's like adding.
To watch that swirling and
that was amazing. That was like adding like water to honey almost. That was so thick. I always find much more so than like looking at the legs of a whiskey, which I often find isn't. I don't particularly find it that useful. I love watching the water dispersing. I find it a very interesting indicator of what kind of mouthfeel to expect and look for. Yeah, that's cool.
We need some of that Schlieren photography, you know, like the slowed down bullets and like that thing, the black and white with the water being added.
We should get in contact with those YouTube guys, the slow-mo guys, and see if they can do some adding water to whiskey slow-mo videos with their 1 to 10,000 camera stuff. That'd be awesome. If anyone happens to know the slow-mo guys, put us in touch. Yeah, this is a really good example of a port cask whiskey, I have to say. This is
the one I've had the most consistently good feedback amongst the small number of people so far. I think that's probably the one that would appeal to most in terms of being a sort of a classic single cask style.
Yeah. Do we have any idea of the kind of port that was in the cask before, like Tawny or Ruby or whatnot?
I don't. I don't. I have a couple of details of the bodega Fernando's des Reyes, and there's a particular style that's associated with that bodega that it most likely is, but I don't know absolutely.
There's a mystery involved, and a lot of people like that, so that's quite all right.
It's funny when you dig down into any of these European roots of these casks, the story gets murky and interesting. You start to find yourself making assumptions. Well, this house style of this bodega was this. Well, I can start to taste that. You don't have to back.
We're very susceptible. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, that is. I mean, it's hard to say because the first two whiskeys were, a wine cask, a specific wine that I'm not particularly familiar with, and a specific dessert wine that I'd never even heard of before. So I didn't really know what to expect. This one, I went into it having an idea of what I would find, and I have to admit, this is exactly the kind of flavor profiles that I was expecting. And exactly the quality I would expect from it as well. This is absolutely stunning. And for those of you who are aware of my my dislike of a certain Bruichladdich note, no, absolutely zero of that in here.
Well, we've nailed it down. Is that note that you that creamy note that you didn't like?
Yeah, that lactic acid note is just completely gone. It is the distillery character is still there. Don't get me wrong. You can still kind of tell it's got that Bruichladdich note to it, but it's been its DNA has been added to in so many different ways from the treatments of the port cask and the aging process that it's just it's a beautiful mutant.
I found with the other whiskies that are just in straight bourbon barrels, the other ones that I have are peated, and the last example we'll get to in this range here. But so I often don't find that sweet and sour bourbon sort of style that in a glass of bourbon so obvious and present. But yeah, we've found your notes and we've pulled it out. So now you just have to, you know what to avoid. You just need single casks all the way. You should cut in this bourbon barrel stuff.
And that's the thing, because I actually very much enjoy bourbon barrel Bruichladdich that are peated, as we will actually get to one later on in this episode. And I actually find that note in the peated ones, but for some reason, as soon as you add peat, everything's out the window. There's the whiskey asterisk, as I like to call it. I can taste burning tires, but in a good way, and it's perfect timing for sirens as this happened. Burning tires, but in a good way. It works with peat. It doesn't really work without that peat for some reason, and that's same sort of lactic acid flavor works really well, I feel, with peat. I don't dislike it when peat is an added element to it. Yeah, for sure. I have shouldn't detract from this. No, not at all. Go ahead. Also, I do want to mention, I keep forgetting as well, the design of the bottles, which, by the way, is absolutely beautiful. Whichever design agency you worked with has nailed it. I love that. I'm guessing you paid a little bit of homage to Bruichladdich by mirroring the shape of the classic Bruichladdich bottles.
Yeah. Absolutely. We went on a real adventure with a design agency who are a very unconventional set of guys from Vancouver, and I really should mention them because you think of a design agency as an outsider, as somebody who you're going to go and consult and probably pay a lot of money to, and they're going to give you something and say, this is what you should do to inspire the public to buy your products. These guys just didn't do that at all. They actually did with us what they did with themselves when they started. So four guys started in a garage in East Vancouver and became one of Canada's top agencies, top 3 or 4. Very, very interesting guys, and they really got us on the same page about what we were trying to do our craft distillery aspirations and with this range. And they really immersed themselves in this to the point where they actually picked up another contract or found an excuse to go to Scotland, to Edinburgh. I think perhaps for a beer company that uses whiskey barrels. I'm not certain. And then they managed to somehow get themselves to Islay by, they missed it's classic.
Imagine them just hitchhiking with a meticulously designed hitchhiking sign.
It was just like that, with the Canadian flag. I was getting texts from these guys. We missed the bus for, to the ferry to Kennaicraig. What do we do? All right, get in a cab, catch it up, kind of thing. And they got there and they stayed a few days. They had a good walk around Tallant farm, and with help of a lot of people, including a good visit to Bruichladdich, and also Rachel McNeil over there on Islay is a good whiskey guide. She I think her site is Whiskey for Women or Whiskey for Girls, I forget. Rachel took the head. But these guys just immersed themselves in whiskey. So when they came back, they were just bubbling about this opportunity, and kind of poured their heart and soul into it. They did persuade me to buy a very expensive set of packaging and foils and all these fancy things, but we sort of went for it.
And I just want to point out that I love Easter eggs in a branding. Like I look at the branding for so long. So I'm a graphic designer by trade as well, and so looking at this bottle thing, that's really beautiful, nice and clean. I love the fact that you've got the wood on the back that you can kind of see through it. Although some of the whiskey is so dark you can't really see the wood, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But the one thing I did not notice until today, because it would be impossible for me to know, is on the actual cork. It's actually printed on the cork as well. Like you've got custom corks. Like that is, you've gone the extra mile.
We went the extra mile, and we thought, why not? I'm actually looking behind the screen at the original artwork that's hanging here. Nice. Of the oak slice on the back, which a local artist here in Vancouver did a very long time ago before it made it onto a label or bottle. So we did sort of go for it. It wasn't just here's a logo, this is what it's going to look like. It was actually a really fun process. So I don't know, maybe I'm a bit sentimental, but I often get a bottle of whiskey and some of the packaging I really like, I can't throw away. I find they're the bottles I don't finish and I like to keep, and then I hold on to the cork, or I use the bottle for some flowers or something.
You need to get yourself one of those special edition compass boxes that comes in these nice sort of plexiglass boxes. They're perfect for keeping corks in.
It's a good idea. So I hope these are the corks that end up being, key rings and paperweights, and the bottles maybe end up with a few bunches of flowers in them. Because too much whiskey and too much independent bottled whiskey, I find, with no names mentioned, and not trying to knock anyone, but it's got a style, and it's a bit dull to be honest sometimes, to have a label in this craft style with cask number and a very standardized format. So we really went for let's get some contrast and some color in here, because they are colorful expressions.
And it suits Bruichladdich particularly well, actually, as well, with their it's got the same kind of boldness that you'd expect from them.
Yeah. I mean, they blew it out of the water. I mean, with I've got a bottle of the Laddie here. When this came out, I think everyone who knew I was from Islay called me and said, "Have you seen this whiskey?
What the hell have they done?"
Japan, and call you, and wow, what is this stuff? And maybe having a picture of Duncan McGilvery on the side of the can was a big source of fun as well, and all the other guys at Bruichladdich, to see where they would show up around the world. But it was very much inspired by their risk taking and their fresh attitude towards it.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. I like a bit of balance in the packaging. Like I'm not really a fan necessarily of adding a huge amount of value to the whiskey by putting it in a ridiculous hand carved wooden box that took 30 hours for an artisan to make or something. Like that's over the top. But I think dressing for the occasion is an important thing. It's Yeah, it feels nicer when it's one thing to meet a very interesting person who's wearing sweatpants. It's something else to meet a very interesting person who's wearing, a kilt or a suit or something.
Right. Yeah, I hope people can walk into a party or give this to the host or give this to their dad or their mum and really kind of appreciate that for the aesthetic appeal. Yeah.
And it certainly stands out on the shelf as well. I think I posted on social media. If not, I'll show you a photo where these are situated in our store right now. It's actually tucked away alongside our SNWS. So we've got a half shelf of SNWS and then a full shelf of SNWS underneath it, and then just a little corner with all the Tallant whiskies. And they are hilariously contrast to the SNWS.
Oh yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah, that's very cool to hear that it's making an impact. Yeah. So I got to ask you, Adam, on the packaging, are you a tin or a no tin man? We had this big debate about this. Should we make a tin or a box? Or
I personally, in terms of selling whiskey, I like a tin because I think more customers than not like having a tin or a box. As soon as I buy a whiskey, there's two things I do when I buy a whiskey and take it home. The first thing I do is throw the box away. The second thing I do is take off the hats and scarves, I call them, the little plastic bits around the neck and the top. I like the naked net look. And then I know it's mine and it's home and it's there for drinking. So I don't care for boxes necessarily, but a lot of people do. But at the end of the day, so long as the whiskey's good, that's the most important thing. I think bottles look better on shelves when they're not in a box.
Yeah, that was some good feedback I had that sort of swung us this way.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. All right, so I don't think I've actually released the port cask yet, so I should do that right now while before people shout at me too much in the live chat that I've not done it yet. So cask, make sure I've got the right one. Yeah, 580 here. This is the port cask 14-year-old Port Charlotte. I saw the word port and went straight Port Charlotte. We're not there yet. 14-year-old Bruichladdich, the unpeated. Regular price $259.04. Now with your 10% discount, it is $233.14. That is an exciting price for that whiskey. And the next whiskey that we have is probably the one that has raised the most eyebrows, partially for the color of the liquid, because good golly. Yes. But also there's, everyone loves a sherry cask whiskey these days. It's the belle of the ball in terms of popularity right now. I would say, I think it's swung enough. Looking at our local members and the way sales are going, especially with the SNWS, sherry cask whiskey has now overtaken peated whiskey as the favorite over here.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is bizarre. I never thought I'd see the day, but yeah, people are loving the sherry cask these days. So this is exciting.
Well, this one is this one is black. I mean,
I feel like this is the closest thing color-wise to a Loch Dew that I'll ever try, because
hopefully different taste.
Yeah.
I'm going to crack this open, which is telling because I've finished my own bottle of this.
I'm going to crack mine open at the same time. Synchronized cracking.
Synchronized unboxing here.
Oh, it's got a good port cock, doesn't it? Right. So sometimes when you get a whiskey that's this dark, it looks hilariously dark in the bottle because obviously like the volume is much more, and as soon as you pour it in the glass, it's like, it's not that dark. Let's see what happens. Oh yeah, that is like Cavalan Solist levels of dark there.
It's dark.
It's pretty damn dark. Not that that's necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just a very interesting thing. And if there's one thing that I think all people need to take note of on their whiskey journey, is that sometimes interesting is the most important part. Oh yeah.
This is on steroids. This is
Yep.
This is a big Spaniard. This one for sure. It's very very powerful.
It's very sort of dark flavors on the nose so far. Well, aromas rather. Getting molasses is the first thing I'm getting there. Blackstrap molasses.
It's whiskey concentrate, first of all. I mean,
58.8% ABV as well, so still on the higher end. Oh yeah.
I get a wee bit of Linseedy varnish straight away, and
Balsamic reduction on the nose for me.
Yeah.
Maybe one of those nice fig-infused balsamic reductions that you can get at the fancy supermarkets. Oh, yeah. And pumpernickel bread. That is an exciting nose. And actually, one of the most exciting things about it is it's not aggressive in any way. It's deep and dark and brooding, but it's welcoming, you know? It's like one of those very, very scary looking caves, which under most circumstances you wouldn't want to set foot in, but it's absolutely freezing outside. And right now it's like, oh, that is shelter. That's beautiful. That is the most wonderful thing I've ever seen.
Come in. Yeah. It's warm. It's, to me, that stuff, that initial nose gives way to this, one of my just real favorite aromas in whiskey, which is suede and leather. I just get this every time. That's why my bottle's finished. I
was thinking it smelled that slightly musty smell that you sometimes get with these kind of whiskies. And when you soon said lathe and suede and leather, my mind went straight to a vintage clothing store in I think it was in Haymarket Square in Edinburgh that I used to go to when I was a student. It's like, weird like cowboy vests and old biker jackets. Yeah. This has got a little bit of that slightly Campbellton-esque funk. Yeah. So I was actually going to challenge myself with this whiskey as to what type of sherry I think this is, because the label, it doesn't seem to say. I'm not sure if you know, but I'm not sure I can quite pick it. It's got some notes that I would expect with an Oloroso, some notes that I would expect with a PX. I don't think it's something funky like an Amontillado, but maybe it is. Do you have any answers? No, I do know. Yeah, it's an Oloroso, and it's a bit surprising because it is so dark and so rich that there are so many examples of sherry cask whiskies and PX finished whiskies that have that sort of weight. But yeah, it's an Oloroso. Then again, I should have probably paid attention to the fact that being a first fill for 14 years, if that was PX, that would be that would be a very strange beast, as that is a time frame much more suited to an Oloroso, isn't it? Oh, beautiful. Yeah, it's very kind of tobacco-y, and it's got that sort of spiciness, and goes to dry for me. It's like late autumn. I feel like we've almost gone through the seasons a little bit here. Yeah, a friend mentioned the same thing. This leaves, that wet leaf, the autumn smell. Yeah, raking leaves. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. As much as I'm still undecided yet as to which one of these I need to buy for myself, I'm fairly certain I might have to buy one of these for my fiance. I think this is her style of whiskey. The result, there's lots of umming and ahhing, and Adam's gone into his happy place here and contemplating buying one, which is even better. Is that where you buy yourself a present for her birthday? Or? Well, my birthday's coming up actually very shortly. I've not yet decided when this video is going to air, so which is slightly awkward in terms of trying to advertise at the end of this video, what's coming next. And I honestly don't know. I don't know the order of things yet. But this is either just before or just after my birthday, so this might be coming home with me just for that reason, to be honest. Oh, that is lovely. All right, well. I can now say that this cask is also available to purchase right now at strathliquor.com, or as well in store at the Strathcona Liquor Store at 919 Douglas Street. You can pick this up regular price $274.70. It is 10% off right now, and for the next couple of weeks at least, probably till the end of the month, I haven't yet decided. for $246.23. That's the 10% discount for all Dram Association members. Again, if you're not a member yet, then sign up for free. You can do so quite easily at strathliquor.com. Just click on clubs and click on Dram Association, and it'll lead you through the whole process. Okay, so before we get on to the last whiskey, which is slightly different from the first four, I just want to speak a little bit about the festival and the charity aspect of what's happening here today. So a huge thank you to everyone that donated and to everyone who bought the festival Glencans last month for our charity. And I can tell you this month you can purchase the more Glencans. We may have sold out, but we're saving a bunch for every single month. So right now you can go back to strathliquor.com, and hopefully if there's still some in stock, you can pick up more Victoria Whisky Festival 2021 Glencans. They're $10 each, with all of the profits going to the monthly charity. This month, we have chosen the Children's Health Foundation of Vancouver Island as our charity of the month. So please do buy the glasses. There's also a donation button at strathliquor.com if you'd like to if you've already got enough Glencans, which I, for one, have about 70. So I think there's a lot of people thinking I have enough Glencans right now. So if you don't need another one, you can just directly donate. And a huge thank you to the local whiskey clubs that we've been working with to distribute the samples of these whiskeys, and for your donations to the charity as well. And a huge thank you to all of the support that we've been getting from all of the importers and producers. And with that, it's time for a little bit of peat. It wouldn't be a Scotch tasting without ending on a little touch of smoke, eh?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it wouldn't. So this is where it all started.
Ah, nice. So we're going backwards in the timeline. It's like we're watching The Witcher on Netflix or something. Very, very satisfying cork pop. For some reason, recently, 50-50, whenever I try and say the words cork pop, I say pork cock. And it's so yeah, sorry if I've said that several times already today, but I can't help it. I believe that's called a spoonerism.
Spoonerism, yeah. I think I say pork chop. So this one is back to where it started. As let's buy a cask of whiskey, one that's just going with the high peat experiment that was Port Charlotte, and sort of dusting that off, and it really looked to me to be something that was maybe a bit more authentic to what Tallant distillery would have made, and it's in its own right. I mean, peat is so prolific on Islay, and a certain sort of flavor of peat that it went so hand in hand with a real discovery for me that I think I tasted peated whiskies at maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 years old, and I never put water in them before, but I thought, oh, these are a bit young and sparkly, and I started to try with a bit of water, and like I realized Bruichladdich in its own right, even when unpeated, it just blooms and all these flavors come out, and I just thought, wow, that's really cool. That's what a lot of peat's about. It's not about some, I can drink more peat than you, for me, but it's about that sort of explosion that happens with a little dot of water. So this one, I wanted to just keep that pure on the straight and narrow, and try to just let that come into balance, and let that mellow, and try to retain enough peat, maybe lose half of it along the way, 12 or 14 years, 16 years, but try to keep that sort of bloom effect.
Mm-hmm. And
so you can be the judge.
Yeah, it smells glorious, I have to say. Just a note on Bruichladdich heavily peating experiments. I had a few people ask about that, and why Port Charlotte is heavily peated, and the ppms that go into it, and of course Octomore is even more so. But even with Octomore, the super heavily peated stuff, it often comes out at the end of the day not necessarily tasting as peated as you'd expect for something like that. So I tried to explain it, and I think this kind of works quite well. It's like, imagine a sculptor right? And you're building you've got a big block of marble, and like the amount of peat is telling you how big this block of marble is that you've got to sculpt down. At the end of the day, that sculpture might be very, very delicate, because you're starting with this big ping of peat, but you're distilling it twice, 3 times, maybe even 4 times if you're Bruichladdich, screw it. And then you're putting it in different types of wood that will, and different parts of the warehouse that are going to make that peat either stay where it is or go down, or it's going to change it. It's going to attach different flavors to it. So, sometimes you'll get a whiskey which is, starts off with a huge block of marble, but it's been chipped away at so much that it ends up being this, beautiful, like blooming flower at the end of the day. Like you need a big chunk of marble to make that kind of a statue. But at the end of the day, the actual weight of it is not actually as much as you'd expect from that much marble that went into it.
Yeah, it's sort of uncharacteristic of a nation known for cheapness to put to take that much.
It's very progressive.
And just let half of it evaporate along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that smells glorious. It's interesting. Do you know where they harvest the peat for Bruichladdich? It's not something I've ever really looked into.
I think Bruichladdich used a variety of peat sources, and I can't speak for them very intelligently, but they certainly, for the higher ones, did get peat from Baird's malts for the very high incarnations of Octomore.
Because I have to say, if I was to guess, purely, I've been really enjoying trying to understand the different types of peat and where they come from. It's something that Brian from Ardbeg really put me onto a couple of years ago. And if I was to guess, I would suggest that maybe the peat that was harvested for this style of whiskey is probably from a slightly higher elevation, if it is Islay peat, simply because it doesn't have as much of that sort of iodine-y note that you get with some of the lower elevation peat.
Yeah, I think so. It's got a bit more acridity to it than the sort of vegetal peat that you might get from a locally malted whiskey, like from the with grain that's come from the maltings in Port Ellen. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, that's a great nose. So what am I getting on the nose? I am getting I keep trying to figure out exactly what it is. Some kind of protein on a bonfire. I think it might be scallops. It's not overly fishy at all. It's not like oysters or anything. But it does have a little bit of that salty meatiness to it with the smoke.
There's a little bit of sort of bacony, prawny something in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice with a nice tiny dash. This feels like weird experimental Australian cooking. A slight dash of Vegemite on there.
Yeah, it's a bit of, there's a bit of malt that comes through there. I'm kind of contradicting myself what I said earlier, but this is the one where I can get a little malt coming through. Mm-hmm. That's it.
But then beneath all of that, there's I want to say like a lemon poppy seed cake. And it's great to see you doing that trick that I'm going to do the same. This is something that Lawrence Graham taught me, the idea of pouring a little into your hand and evaporating the alcohol off to get the true peat.
I sort of learned that trick at home.
Oh, nice.
When rolling a barrel once that was very old and ended up with jeans drenched in whiskey and all over my hands. And then thought, oh wow, there's the malt.
Yeah, it's amazing. Every time you do that, you remember, oh yeah. Every time it smells like Maltesers with something else added to it.
It's great.
Or Horlicks.
It's great for identifying those cheeky grain whiskies that are thrown in at tastings.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I do go straight to a little dash of water in this one, but that's your preference.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to know it first at full strength before I start adding personally, but that is good. And that is the one thing that I felt was missing from the only other Bruichladdich independent bottling I've seen in BC. It actually, weirdly enough, was a 14-year-old bourbon cask Port Charlotte. but it was watered down to 46, which I felt was such a shame. It just was lacking that volume.
Yeah, you can sort of see the intention with doing that. There's enough flavor there to carry it, but just in the peat, but the weight maybe wasn't there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly more. There was definitely more than enough flavor, but yeah, that viscous mouthfeel that I like from higher strength whiskey was a little bit lacking. That being said, I try not to be too much of a snob when it comes to ABV. I've enjoyed many a 40% whiskey, and if I'm just sat drinking whiskey at home, and I've been known to add enough water to make it 35% and just sit there sipping on it all night. There's nothing wrong with that. But I just enjoy having the option, really.
I feel like I'm licking a roof slate and breaking it open on the nose. It's just that flinty, slatey note.
Yeah, one of the words that the SNWS has been just in love with for the last year, and it seems to turn up every single month, which I think is perfect for this, is petrichor as well. That's that feeling of like the ground just after it's finished raining.
Ah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I feel like one person on the SNWS panel discovered that word and is just very excited to use it all the time. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's that flinty concrete smell for sure.
And then on the palate, something very particular to my childhood, which I'm sure is not going to mean very much to many people in Canada, but I'm sure it probably means something to you. I've never eaten one, but it tastes like I remember it smelling, playing conkers as a kid. When you smashing the conkers into each other, the horse chestnuts, I guess they're technically called, which, they definitely exist here. There's a few trees down by the museum here in Victoria. In England, you tie them to a shoelace and you smash them against each other. I don't know why. It's some kind of outlet for your childhood violence, I guess. But it was very fun. It kind of smells a little bit like that. It's got that chestnutty thing going. Sorry, it tastes a little bit like that, smells rather.
I thought you were going to say something close to your home was the Pontefract cake. I thought you were going to say
Yeah, I could see that too. The crystallized sugar, little crunchy bits. Yeah, that is glorious. One thing I always look with in a peated whiskey is when peat is not just the screaming hair metal guitar solo, but actually plays a more interesting integral part with other instruments, other flavors. Then this does that very well, I think.
Yeah, I got quite geeky about tracking these in their maturation, and always confirmed and measured the ABVs along the way, and tried to get a feel for what was happening in terms of evaporation and various mechanisms. And this one came in, some of them were obviously older casks that there was a lot more evaporating from them, and they were sort of oxidizing quickly. And this one seemed to be sort of in the middle. And I mean, the Angel's share on Islay is pretty meager compared with Speyside. But definitely this one picked up quite a bit from the barrel and was able to sort of oxidize a bit as well and kind of mellow a bit at the same time. In the middle.
And 56.4 ABV is kind of what you'd expect a 14-year-old to be, I think, under those circumstances as well. So that's great. Beautiful. Well, a fantastic lineup. I should, before I forget to release this Port Charlotte, this is available right now at strathliquor.com. And again, all you need to do to find these whiskies is go to the search bar and search for Tallant, Tallant, or you can go to the Dram Association page and they'll just magically appear in the featured whiskey section. You do have to press refresh though. So yeah, don't just sit there doing nothing. Hit refresh. And you can hit refresh right now and you'll find this Port Charlotte, regular price $260.78, now with a 10% discount, $234.70, which is just wonderful. So to wrap things up, I want to ask you, Simon, what is next? What's gonna happen next with Tallant? Do you have any plans coming up for the upcoming distillery? Do you know what's happening next with your casks that are still maturing over in Scotland?
Yeah, good question. It's been a real roller coaster with trying to start a distillery. I thought it would be tough to find investors or many things, but we really got caught behind the Vancouver industrial real estate boom and the property boom in general here. So I've had a great adventure seeing inside all of Vancouver's industrial buildings. It's sort of fun in itself to find out what's being made in your own town. There's a chance that we have to develop a building that we're looking at right now in Vancouver, in East Vancouver, that we're working on, which looks pretty good. And I'll try to sort of temper my optimism. And it would be really lovely to get those barrels into that space in some form, even to swish a little bit of new spirit around in them and see what happens. But like you say, just to sort of put them there and acknowledge that these barrels have come from Spain and Portugal and France and been through the mill, on their journeys, and have that there as a talking point. So we'll keep pushing along with that plan. And on the other side, yeah, there's a few whiskeys still there in barrels. I guess with this range as an independent bottler, there's always the opportunity to source other whiskeys and expand, which is really interesting to me. In my own sort of whiskey journey. Yeah, and the whiskey that's there for the most part is heavily peated. We've got some Loch-in-Dolls and some Port Charlottes. I've toyed with the idea of developing a blend. So I do find blended whiskey extremely interesting from a whole other perspective.
Absolutely, yeah.
Hopefully not too offensive to the single cask and single malt lover.
Even the SNWS is blending these days.
Yeah, it is a pretty interesting aspect to it, and I didn't appreciate the skill of it growing up on Islay. To be honest, you're exposed to these distilleries and they had their character, and then later you realize, wow, why do I really love Black Bottle? Well, it's because it's Bonnet Haven, and it's.
Well, you should mention that Black Bottle is the whiskey that got me into whiskey. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's beautiful. Yeah, I've been refilling the Tallant bottles of Black Bottle just to have them on the shelf at my own house. So that's interesting. Maybe a bit of a selfish pursuit. Otherwise, I'd be open to doing the same and putting them out there as single casks. Lots of options. I'd throw it out to you and anyone. What would you do? It's not a huge amount of whiskey. It's a few barrels. Is it good to remain a purist and maybe take some of these extreme examples and put them out there at this sort of level? If they're up to it, not all barrels are, of course. Or should I be selfish and learn to do some blending? It's open.
In the wise words of a meme I can't remember the origins of, why not both? You could always bottle half a cask and use the other half for blending. Yeah,
I love the idea of maybe sort of paying a bit of respect to the Canadian whiskey making traditions and rules, where somewhat different to Scotland. There are more than one grain, and my God, you distill and ferment and distill these and mature them in their own right. You end up with a whole lot of ingredients that becomes Canadian whiskey, with a bit of latitude to add other ingredients, which could maybe be a heavily peated whiskey from Scotland.
Absolutely,
it would be a nice mixture of the two traditions, and perhaps a nice way to approach the craft distillery idea.
And you could always do something along the lines of what Adelphi has been doing recently with their Kincardine range and things, where they're mixing Scotch whiskey with Indian whiskey or Scotch whiskey with Japanese whiskey and things. Like, why not have a blend of Scotch and Canadian? Like, it'd be a really interesting experiment.
I think that's it. There's some extreme, even more extreme examples where I can see, obviously, experience of Bruichladdich and has sort of opened my eyes to gin. And what an amazing environment we live in when it comes to contemplating making a gin.
Absolutely.
But when you look at how the gin and whiskey are sort of starting to blur, there's now whiskey available in Canada with some foraged botanicals added, part of the process. And there's certainly some long barrel-aged gins which have a lot of characteristics of whiskey.
And a perfect segue right now, actually, as you mentioned that, because we have another whiskey which is currently 10% off to all our Dram Association members, which is tied into exactly that, but also all of the charity aspect of what we're doing. That was bottled for the 2020 Victoria Whisky Festival. We still have some left. Our custom blended Old Perth from the formerly Morrison Mackay, now just Morrison Distilling Company. And this smells like a gin. I will next time you're over on the island when the restrictions have been lifted, come over and I will pour you a dram of this. On the nose, it's got this wonderful juniper botanical note to it, which for people that don't like gin is honestly a little off-putting. But if you like gin or if you don't mind gin, this is a fantastic whiskey. And again, 10% off at strathlager.com right now. And sorry, please carry on. Just perfect segue.
Fantastic example. There's horses for courses, and I like to see again the SMWS. You discover such anomalies that it really opens your eyes to just flavors in general. I mean, I've started using wine and whiskey and even beer in my cooking as I'm a bit of an amateur, but just the depth of flavor. And you think of these worlds of gin and whiskey being separate. It's pretty cool to play around, and I do a lot of home blending and experimenting with that.
I have to admit, I do exactly the same thing, and one of the reasons I love picking up single cask bottles is they make great fun blending ingredients for doing little home blends and having a bit of fun on a rainy Thursday,
Right? Yeah. So why not both?
Absolutely.
Very good answer. Take that answer to heart.
Beautiful. So I think we'll call the video an end there. Thank you very much for everyone joining us. If you have any questions that you'd like me to pass along to Simon, then please do shoot me a message or leave it. You can even leave a message in the comments section of this video, and maybe even Simon, if he wanders across onto YouTube and finds it, might even answer directly. But yes, if you have any questions for either of us, please do let us know. I very, very much look forward to seeing what the future holds for Tallant. Thank you very much, Simon, for joining us here today on Drinking Out Loud.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adam. It's a whole new take on whiskey to be doing this online. You're a true pioneer in this. So thank you very much for also for giving me a bunch of great tasting notes along the way here.
You are absolutely welcome. Thank you for joining us at home. We look forward to seeing you again for the next video, which at the time of recording, I have literally no idea what it is. I do know that we've got some fantastic things lined up for the rest of this partnership with the Victoria Whisky Festival. And keep an eye on this YouTube channel for the next Dram Report to find out all the latest and greatest news and see what's coming up this month. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Sláinte mhath.
Find your way home.